Many of us at one time or another like to poke a little fun at the Iowa legislature. I think we realize, however, that there are members of that body who have provided much of the leadership so badly needed to help resolve some of the problems, such as the current energy shortage, which face our state today. And one such man is Senator George Milligan, a native of Des Moines and a state senator from that 33rd district in Des Moines. Senator Milligan is chairman of the Senate Natural Resources Committee and the Energy Crisis Study Committee of the Iowa Legislature. In addition to membership on several other committees, he has also served on the National Legislative Conference's Special Committee on Energy, which is an advisory committee to the Federal Energy Office. Senator Milligan has taken time out from a busy schedule, which includes, I might add, his campaign for the Republican nomination to the United States Senate race this fall, to speak to us this afternoon on the energy crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Outdoor Living Symposium, it is my pleasure to introduce to you this afternoon Senator George Milligan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Can you all hear me back there? All right. If not, put up your hand. And then on the other hand, if you hear too much, put up your hand, and we'll try to come out either way. I am very, very happy to be here this afternoon. I'm going to try to just chat with you briefly and tell you where I think we are on the energy crisis, and then try to open this up for any questions that you may have. I'm going to talk about the energy crisis, and I'm going to talk about another crisis that I think is very, very important at this point in time. As was mentioned, I happen to be in the middle of a campaign for the United States Senate. I'm going to try to keep that out of this, so this will be a non-political gathering, but if I slip over, please excuse me. I have my own sort of energy crisis going around the state, and that's why I drink so much coffee. So I want you to know that. Let me tell you where I think we are in the energy crisis, and then, as I say, let me try to answer some of your questions. I think that the energy crisis is here right now and is not only of great importance to us as a state and as a nation at this time, but I think it's going to be with us for a considerable period of time, and I want to explain. Let's start with the basics. We have a country that is oriented to creature conveniences and goods and a very hyper economy built on the consumer using these goods and these energy resources. As you know, because of the Middle East crisis and the embargo on petroleum products coming into the country, many of the things that were talked about as problems over a long period of time became problems that were imperative and upon us in a very short period of time because of the embargo. Now, as you look at the situation, and I'll just be as brief as I can, think of the total petroleum or energy supply in this country being normally an inventory position of about 208 days. 208 days for a petroleum product. Then feed in there the fact that we have the embargo coming from the Mideast, and that pipeline of either crude or the refined product coming into the United States takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. Now, the imports were coming mostly in to the northeastern states, the New England states and Delaware, New York, up in there. What has happened, therefore, is that what is not happening right now is that we are not getting the imports that we used to get. There's been a great controversy as to what the figures really showed and whether we can rely on the figures made available to us by industry. In regard to imports, that is not much of a problem because the data on imports is what we call hard data. We have always had a check of the import coming into the United States. And if I'm working now off of figures that were given to me as a representative of the state of Iowa at the Federal Energy Office on the 22nd, 23rd of February. We were told at that time that a year ago, and I'm using approximate figures, we had imports of approximately 6 million barrels a day coming into the United States. It was estimated that our demand a year later was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.5 million barrels a day. what is actually coming in is somewhere less than 5 million barrels a day. So based on what our normal demand would be at this time, we are short at least 2.5 million barrels of either crude or refined product coming into the United States. Well, we say when you look at 17 or 18 million barrels a day usage, that isn't crucial. But it really is crucial because it puts us somewhere between 13 and 15% short on gasoline, and it puts us way, way short on a number of other items. For that reason, the Iowa legislature, for example, passed a law reducing the speed limits in the state to 55 miles an hour to cut down on the gasoline consumption. That has now been followed by the other states, and effective March 1. In effect, that is the law throughout the United States. That should cut down the consumption of gasoline an estimated 20 to 25% if everybody works with it. And as I came up here this morning, I can tell you that the traffic has slowed down, and this really makes a difference. But here's what we're faced with. We are faced with major political and social and economic unrest in this country if we don't get a hold of this particular short-run energy problem. Because if you look at the northeastern states, you are looking at a situation where we have a possibility of having massive unemployment and the social unrest that go with that. And you saw just a touch of that even here in the state of Iowa 3 weeks ago when we had the incredible situation where we were convoying trucks across this state, much the same way that we had to convoy covered wagons over 100 years ago. Now think about it. Here we were, right in Iowa, with a highway patrol and an escort of airplanes up in the air trying to get trucks across the state. Now think what happens if you have a situation next year or even this spring where people are thrown out of work in major population centers where they're cold because they cannot get the needed supplies to heat their homes, and they also have a feeling that government doesn't care about them anymore and that they cannot communicate. And I submit to you, if you put all that together, that it could be what the poets would call the hour past midnight. And that's why the energy crisis is as serious and as crucial as it really is, both in the short run and in the long run. It's serious in the long run because we are going to have to take the resources that we have, which are finite, quite frankly, the way we've been using them, and we have to allocate them not only to the people in this country, but to the people around the world. Now, what is the Iowa legislature doing? The Iowa legislature passed a week ago in the Iowa Senate a bill that I think answers some of the problems, the energy crisis here in the state. It gives a new 11-member council the power to say that an energy crisis exists which could affect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of this state, at which time the Energy Policy Council gives the governor the word that this has happened, and the governor then can do such things as regulate business hours. He can allocate certain resources, and we've already given them the power at the state geologist level to find out what the actual energy supplies are in the state so we can have some kind of an inventory to know what it is that is happening. This is a reasonable and responsible approach to the energy problem in the state of Iowa, I believe, because of the fact that we are not giving carte blanche power to the executive, but we're keeping a balance. The way that the law is drawn, any of these actions that take place must be reviewed by the legislature within 10 days if the legislature is in session. If the legislature is not in session, there is a review by the Legislative Council representing the legislature within 10 days. The reason for that is to keep the balance of power within the government here in the state, and secondly, to bring the people along with the executive so that everyone understands that the thing is real and you get the public behind what's going on. I'll tell you quite frankly, the energy crisis is now being met by a growing and a burgeoning bureaucracy in Washington that is approaching 2,000 people who are trying to get a job done. They're spread out in 4 locations in Washington, D.C. They've had all kinds of shuffling of personnel, trying to bring them from the Department of the Treasury, the Department of the Interior, various places to meet the energy crisis and to try to get this thing in hand. It was my observation when I was in Washington in December that there was something approaching chaos, but that they were trying. It was my observation as of the 23rd or the 22nd of February that they were much farther along than they had been, but they were still having a very real problem in communicating with the American people. I was disappointed in December to find that they were telling us a whole batch of things off the record that we were not allowed to come back and tell the people in the various states. I don't ever intend to get pulled into that sort of circumstance again. I don't think that's the way to treat the energy crisis. I think Simon made a very bad mistake 3 weeks ago. They were trying to negotiate the trucker strike. They were trying to get the facts on the table. He found out the press and the American public were in that room. He said, "We'll talk no further until this is a closed session." I'm telling you that as people in this room and as people of this state, you have the right to know what's going on. You have the right to know the facts. And I think that we have to have open government to make this thing work. Where do we go in the long run? In the long run, we have to make rational and reasonable decisions on how to meet the energy crisis. What we're faced with right now is not dissimilar to some of the choices that we had to make during the time of the Civil War. And the way we make those choices can affect the lives and the purposes of everybody in this room. It's my belief if we begin to nationalize businesses, if we concentrate power in Washington, if we radically change the balance of power in this country and we make the wrong choices, we're going to have a situation that none of us really wants. We have to look at alternate sources of energy. We have to look at the use, for example, of methane gas, something that we talked about 30 years ago, something that is used in other parts of the world, something that we should very definitely look into. I'm talking about the long range now. We have to look at nuclear fusion. Now, I know many of you in this room may be opposed to any kind of nuclear siting, but I submit to you that we have to, as rational people, look at all the choices available to us. We have to examine the coal reserve, especially here in the state of Iowa, and that ties in with the governor's recommendation of $5.5 million for this purpose. There are a number of ways of trying to answer the problem, and I'm just citing a few of them. Solar energy, for example. Solar energy plus the use of heat pumps and all is an answer for most locations within the United States. And some very significant research has gone on at the University of Delaware here in the last several years, as well as in California. This is the mix. These are the things that have to be done. It would appear that we're going to spend something like anywhere from $10 to $20 billion in the next 5 years to try to come up with some of the answers. These answers are going to affect everyone in this room. We have to cut down on the consumption. There's no kidding about that. Our lifestyles are probably changing. I don't think that the world is ever going to be the same as for Americans, perhaps, as it always was. We're going to have to view things differently. Let me just give you an example of what's going to happen in the state of Iowa. We have a number of people who like to go camping. If the gasoline is as short as I think it's going to be in the next 2 or 3 months, those people who have gone to Wisconsin and Minnesota and have gone out to the West Coast and the national parks and all are going to rediscover our own Iowa park system for the first time in many, many years. And the usage of our state parks, especially right down here at the ledges, for example, could go up in geometric proportions. We could have anywhere from 20 to 50% greater usage of the state parks. We had 11 million visitations in those parks in the last year of count. That's just one, for instance, of what can happen. So that's where we are in the energy crisis. It affects Iowa in another real way. Nobody really seems to know what the shortage or the abundance of nitrogen fertilizer is. As I travel around the state, I think we have a very real shortage, and that can affect the economy of this state, and that can affect our position in world affairs. The energy crisis also fits into another crisis that I think that we are avoiding, or we are so consumed with what's going on internally in Fortress America that we're forgetting about the rest of the world. If you take such places in the world as Central America, South Asia, and certain parts of tropical Africa, for example, they are faced with the possibility, certainly in 1974 and certainly in 1975, of about 30 major countries in the lower 1/4 of the world's population regarding economic base of being faced with very real starvation. And the irony, as has been pointed out by several writers, is that as we watch this starvation taking place on our national television screens, the energy that is going into giving us that particular image or picture on the television screen could be the energy that was needed to supply the fertilizer and the necessary ingredients for those very same people not to be faced with that starvation. And I don't mean to stand up here like doomsday or even anything like that, but I think it's a very, very serious situation. The fuel crisis and the energy crisis is tied into it because you see the poorer nations cannot afford the price of petroleum on the world market the way it has gone up as it has in the last several months, and they also were already at a disadvantage trade-wise. All these things fit into the mix, and all these things are going to affect us. So, there we are. That's what's going on. And what I want to tell you is that I think, in a very honest way, that what we are talking about regarding the energy crisis feeds into what I think is one of the most significant things that's going on in the country right now, and that is what I call the confidence crisis. I sense, and I think all of you do, that there is a very definite crisis of confidence in ourselves and in our government and in the ultimate questions about who are we and where are we going and why. And I think that it's all interrelated and it's all tied together. And I think if we don't become aware of what's happening on the energy scene, if the people I'm talking about in the population centers of this country feel that they are being put upon by major oil companies or their government and that we don't have the ability to govern ourselves, the communication is going to break down, and the communication that takes place on the streets and highways is not the kind of communication that you want in our governmental process. So there's where we are on the 12th of March. That's how I see the energy situation and the confidence crisis and a whole batch of things. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I probably have raised more questions than answers I've come up with. Okay? You can't insult me, you can't make me mad, and I've got an exit behind me, so we're all set. Malcolm X always used to have, how many of you have read the autobiography of Malcolm X? All right, as you recall in there, he always made sure that he had his back to the wall. And I think that's good for anybody running for national political office or whatever. Right. Well, I tell you, to me, that's a portion of a large picture, and I don't have all the facts, and I don't think anyone in the country really does. We are faced with a situation where approximately 60 to 65% of the refinery capacity is controlled by 8 major oil companies. Now, some are saying that because of the abuse of this economic power, we are faced with shortages that are not real shortages but are manufactured for the purpose of driving the price up. That's also related to the control of the pipelines. And I think that we very definitely have to get the facts and not go on a witch hunt, but find out where we really are regarding the control not only of the supply but the distribution and the refining and all of these products in this country. And it may be that we're going to have to have a breakup of some of that concentration of economic power. I'm not in a position now to know on a factual basis if that's where we really are. I understand what you're saying. I just don't think that we're up to the facts yet. You see, what we've done through the years is rely on the industry's figures. We're faced with a situation in Washington where the people who are running the program are not very few of them have any background in the oil business. And if you ask them why, they say, well, frankly, we don't think we can because we think the press and the public will get on us because they think we're being favorable to the oil companies and the oil industry. And so you have people that are well-meaning people and they have good backgrounds in making decisions and all who have not really had anything to do with the oil industry. And that's part of what we're faced with right now. Any other questions? I would like to point out that because of our governmental regulation, we've caused some of the problems that we have. In 1955, the Supreme Court ruled that we had the power to set the price of natural gas at the wellhead, and therefore we supplied a very clean, a very available supply of natural gas to the Midwestern states, for example, that was very economically and reasonably priced. And as a result, your utilities and others converted to use this resource. Now we find that because of those artificial pricing situations, that we didn't go out and discover more of that resource, and we also find that that resource is needed to produce the nitrogen fertilizer to get the crops going and all. These are really tough, yes. I was not aware of that as an old circus lover, but that is true. Well, yeah, that's why I say some of the choices that we're going to be making in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months are choices that we're going to get locked in, and they're going to affect us for the rest of your life and my life. Project independence, that sort of thing. I mean, are these reasonable goals? Who really knows? I guess I begin to split with you a little bit philosophically when I think that we're going to sit at the governmental level and we're going to say to a Gulf that you shall not be in the circus business, because then pretty soon they might be telling Milligan that, you know, maybe he ought to be doing some things differently or whatever. And I haven't found anybody in Washington that is smart enough to tell me what to be doing 24 hours a day. So I'd like to set some broad guidelines, but I don't want the government to get in the circus business either. Yeah. I don't really know. The key thing, and the thing that all of us asked when we were with the federal energy people was, they said, we're going to get through it, especially if you can cut down on the consumption. And they said, we'll get through it if the oil embargo is lifted. But then when you ask them the next question, and you say, if the oil embargo is lifted by when, they say, take a note of that, so-and-so, but they don't give you an answer. And I think that's the crucial answer. Now, if any of you watch the stock market, and I'm sure a number of you do, we've had a rally going on here for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and that's predicated on the fact that the major oil-producing countries are having a meeting here today and would look as though perhaps the embargo is going to be lifted. But still, remember, you got that 8 to 12-week pipeline problem. And I really don't have the answer. I'll tell you this, that even back in December we were told that they were working on a rationing program and that the rationing books were being printed up at that time, but we weren't supposed to talk about it. Frankly, from what I've seen of the personnel that will be administering that program, they're great people, but they aren't smart enough to tell all of us what to do. And I think if we get into rationing, we're going to have something that nobody ever wanted to see. It may be the only way out, but they're talking about establishing 6,000 new offices to allocate these resources. And by the way, it was kind of fun. We had a guy who's no longer with them who came in and made the statement that if the American public and the politicians would get off their backs, that they could get this thing put together. And the Irish in me came out, and I got up and reminded them that the President of the United States the night before had 19 limousines waiting for his airplane with the engines running in those 19 limousines. And it was my point and the point of others there that we have to show leadership at the national level, and that this guy, this technocrat, should not be going around making statements such as that. And I hate to be like the Count of Monte Cristo and seek revenge, but I did notice a week later that that guy went down to Florida and told the people in the oil business down there that according to his facts and figures, that they had no problem whatsoever with their gasoline shortages, and they almost had to have an armed escort to get him out of the hall because people had been getting punched at the gas pumps and everything else. And the other fun thing was that this gentleman was about 30 minutes late for our meeting that morning because he'd been in a gas line in Maryland. Okay, I don't know what the point of it all is, but I guess nobody is perfect in this world of ours. I don't really have the answer, but I think what Iowa has done is looked into the future and set up a situation so that we won't be caught a day late, but we'll have some sort of a rational way to meet the situation if it should come up. Yes. In the next coming months, I think that very definitely our travel is going to be restricted just by the fact that the price of the product is going up and there may be less of it. Some of those things I think are going to be important. I think over a period of time that we're going to have to structure some of our appliances differently. I was reading late last night that they're now talking about maybe setting the thermostats, if they can figure out how to do it, on your air conditioning and other cooling devices and all this summer at about 80 degrees. The question is, how do you get everybody to do that? That sort of thing. I think that we're going to be affected, as I say, because of agricultural production and some other things. It just, we're all going to have to slow down and relax a little bit. It's a real change to go down, as far as I'm concerned, to go down the interstate at 55 miles an hour. That sort of thing. It could be worse. It really could. It could be a change in lifestyle because we could have affected the economic mix so that we have the unemployment, and it's the jobs that concern me the most. And if we have the unemployment and we have the situation that you had in Great Britain where it brings about a change in government, that's a lifestyle that could be of great significance, even beyond our own comfort. Yeah. You've got to define, are you... I only heard certain portions of that, and I haven't heard the full tape or whatever. And you're talking. His question is, how do I feel about the broadcasts put together on the public band radio, where as public service they were talking about the dangers of developing nuclear energy, right? And then some of the utilities objected. My only answer would be that the airwaves are the public domain. And I do think that you have to have a balance when advice is given out. Now, they're already talking about changing some of the advertising that is allowed by the oil companies so that it won't be one-sided. But as I understand some of those broadcasts, they really only did give one side, and I think you ought to have both sides. This nuclear thing is a very, very tough thing, and I don't know if any of you had an opportunity or not. But in the Iowa Senate, we had a public hearing, and we had two known experts on the nuclear question from various places in the United States. I think when you get a balance, that the public is better served. By the way, we came to no conclusions, and again, contrasts always strike me. This debate took place in the Iowa Senate on nuclear fission and nuclear fusion and the whole thing, and that building was built by a very unique system of wood roads whereby mule power pulled up the stone and the brick to put the building together. And I just submit that the world goes on. And we couldn't even light the Capitol that night because of the energy crisis on the outside, yes. For what purpose? Yeah, I don't know. Have any of you had an opportunity to go through the Duane Arnold Center that's about 10 or 11 miles outside of Cedar Rapids? Any of you? I had not. Well, you know what I'm talking about then. They take you through that thing, and it's really something to see, and you are left with the impression that they are really trying to make this thing as you know, as scientifically and structurally sound as they can. But one of the things that really struck me was that their original projections for the cost of that plant were somewhere, and I'm guilty of throwing out figures here, but I think they're essentially correct. The original cost was $109 million, and they were bringing it in at something over $200 million. And even though there's a war going on in the Iowa legislature now as to whether we should have a moratorium on any further nuclear power plant development in Iowa for the next 5 years, it's my clear understanding that no utility is asking to put up any additional sites in Iowa at this time. And it has to do with the very economics of the situation. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We were fortunate this year because we got, as you know, we had a relatively mild winter, or we have had a relatively mild winter, and that's one of the things that really saved us. And we might come to that. I don't know. It's a matter of how do you do it, you see. And my real fear is that the news comes out that the embargo is lifted, and everybody says it's business as usual, and they go to the gasoline pump. Then look out, because the allocation just is not there, and it is not in position at this time. As I pointed out, going back to gasoline, for example, we have the inventory, but a lot of that is residual inventory that has to be in the pipelines just to keep them going, and a lot of it is not in the right places in the country. It got so bad, as you know, in Delaware, that the governor and the attorney general had to go in and petition the federal courts because they were closing hospitals and they couldn't get supplies for police and fire and other things. And that's how acute it can really be. Yeah. I don't know. I have mixed emotions. I think probably not, because I don't think we're working from a good enough factual base yet to know. And I also think that when government arbitrarily goes in and changes the rules in the middle, that you then have a continuing series of eruptions that may not be where you want to end up. I think there were some good facets of that bill, but if you say we're going to roll back prices, then somebody has to say to what level, and they have to say whose price they're going to roll back, and do you go all the way back to the producing and the refining level, or what have you. And in my judgment or whatever, you begin to compound the problem. It's the same problem that we saw with wage price freezes. It looked like a panacea, but those very same wage and price freezes are the things that cause some very big disruptions in our economy as far as I'm concerned. I would fall back on the fact, though, that we might be somewhere where we were during the time of Teddy Roosevelt or in the early 1900s, where we're going to have to again look at the economic system and make sure that we haven't allowed some industries to have too much of a sway, not only in the way in which they price their products, but in the way in which they affect our foreign affairs. Yeah. I just don't know. It could be. I just think that you know, Right now, we're used to instant solutions. We're used to instant television, instant coffee, cocoa, frosting on the cake, and the whole thing. And the excess profits tax might look like, you know, one of those instant solutions, but it may cause the non-investment of venture capital into the very industries where we need it, or it may stop the money going into research into alternate uses of fuel and technology. I just don't know. Yeah. Yeah. But you see, in the Federal Energy Office right now, you're getting into a lot of political considerations. Agriculture is the #1 priority. Well, what is agriculture? And you can affect the economic lives of a lot of people, and that has to do with elections and power and everything else. And that's where I have a problem. Yes. Well, the way the federal government is going at it now, they have 10 regional offices throughout the country, and those 10 regional offices are charged with the responsibility of coordinating with the states. But frankly, both for administrative and political reasons, Washington seems to be of the opinion that it's going to be handled on the state level. And I say for political reasons, if Iowa denies its citizens something that they think they have as a right, they're going to be mad at what's going on in the State House and the Capitol in Des Moines, as opposed to Washington, right? And that's sort of a buffer to those people in power in Washington. And secondly, because of the things that I was pointing out in structuring a whole new department and everything, they're not ready to do it yet. And so what allocations would really be taking place, I don't know yet. But that's why the council was established to, #1, get the facts here on the inventory position as fast as they can, the estimates of usage, and to have some plans on the books if it should come about. And I'm just not there. I'll take a couple more and then let you all go and do whatever happens on a spring afternoon. First answer is that the Iowa legislature does not control the universities. The Board of Regents does. We respond to the requests from the Board of Regents. If they had asked for additional funding for the physics department at Iowa State, for example, then we would respond to that. I don't know that they have, and I am not on the appropriations committee for the Board of Regents. But that would be the way that would normally work, and I would prefer to see it continue to work that way. Just a private prejudice, I do not ever want to see the Iowa legislature running the universities in this state of ours, but I won't get off on that topic. Your second question, I don't know the answer to it. I think that because of some of the lawsuits that have been brought and all, that the public has been given standing in the courts, legal standing, to come in and raise some of these considerations. Now, on the national level, we've regressed a little bit. We've stopped some of those rights, and I'm not sure that is correct. Listen, I'll take one way back there, and then I'll let you all go. Right. I've got to watch my answer because I tend to be blasphemous, but I think that what is now being done to get the attention of the Corps of Engineers and to say that we're tired of being kicked around is what should be done. Now, I don't know if the barrier dam is the answer or some of the other concepts, but I can tell you as a member of the Natural Resources Committee and because of some of the other things that I'm doing, that we are trying to give some support to protecting that resource. I'll tell you, that's just openers, because we're going to see that in other areas of this state. And we're going to have to be very, very careful. And let me just tell you that I'm proud of the Iowa legislature, and frankly for the part I had in some of it, on Iowa's Open Spaces program. The Iowa legislature, one of the first states in the country, appropriated $2 million last time around to acquire natural areas in this state for the people of the state. And as a result of that, the $2 million has been committed. We now have an additional 7,300 acres of land in Iowa with very unique natural characteristics in 20 locations. And I think that's a step in the right direction. But, yeah, be standing there with brooms or whatever it takes when they come in and start messing up the ledges. And this time around, we've appropriated approximately $250,000 to the Department of Conservation to help with additional policing and garbage collection and that sort of thing to try to cushion what we think is going to happen in the state parks this time around. Listen, I very much have appreciated being here. I thank you very much for the forum. The only thing I can close with is a quote that Harlan Miller used to have as columnist of the Des Moines Register and Tribune in his coffee and his column over the coffee, and that was, "There is no solution, seek it lovingly." Thank you very much.